The autumn sun rose over Seoul as it had for millions of mornings before, bathing the city in golden light. Dr. Nari Kim stood by her laboratory window, coffee mug in hand, watching students hurry across the university grounds. It was an ordinary Tuesday at Seoul National University, where she had worked as a xenobiologist for nearly a decade. Another quiet day, she murmured to herself, turning away from the window to check her email. That was when her phone began to buzz with notifications. At first, she ignored them, assuming they were merely reminders about the afternoon faculty meeting. But when her computer screen automatically switched to the emergency broadcast system, she knew something was wrong. "This is not a test," said the grave-faced news anchor. "We are receiving reports of multiple unidentified objects in Earth's orbit." Dr. Kim's coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. She barely noticed as she stared at the footage showing massive dark ships against the blue of Earth's atmosphere. They were unlike anything humans had ever built, angular in some places, curved in others, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "It's happening," she whispered. Though she had dedicated her career to the theoretical study of alien biology, she had never truly expected to see proof of extraterrestrial life in her lifetime. Her laboratory door burst open as Professor Ta Park rushed in, his tie askew and forehead gleaming with sweat. "Nari, are you seeing this?" he gasped, pointing at her screen where satellite images showed more detail of the alien vessels. Each one was at least 3 kilometers long, with smaller craft beginning to detach from their hulls. "I can't believe it," Dr. Kim replied, her scientific mind already racing with questions. "How many are there?" 17 major ships that we can detect," said Professor Park, pulling up additional data on his tablet. "They're positioned over different continents. One is directly above the Korean peninsula." The university's emergency system began blaring, instructing all personnel to return home immediately. But Dr. Kim and Professor Park remained, transfixed by the unfolding events. "The military must be responding," Dr. Kim said. As if answering her, the broadcast showed footage of fighter jets scrambling from bases around the world. The American, Chinese, and Russian air forces had all launched interceptors, while South Korea's own jets screamed overhead. "They're establishing a defensive perimeter," Professor Park explained, his background in international security suddenly relevant. "But what weapons do we have that could possibly affect ships of that size?" They soon had their answer. The broadcast showed missiles striking the alien vessels, only to dissipate against invisible shields. Laser defense systems on the ships swatted fighter jets from the sky like insects. "It's useless," Dr. Kim said quietly. "Their technology is too advanced." Within hours, smaller craft began descending from the motherships. They didn't target major cities as movies had always predicted. Instead, they landed in remote regions: the Siberian tundra, the Australian outback, the Amazon rainforest, the Sahara Desert, and the mountains of North Korea. "They're establishing bases away from population centers," Professor Park noted. "But why?" The world's governments issued contradictory statements. Some called for calm and peaceful contact attempts. Others declared martial law. The United Nations convened an emergency session, but there was little they could agree on. Night fell over Seoul, but Dr. Kim and Professor Park remained in the lab, which had become their command center. Other faculty members and graduate students had joined them, bringing food and equipment. They had established connections with scientists around the world, all trying to understand what was happening. "The aliens haven't attacked civilians directly," said Min, a graduate student monitoring social media reports. "But they've neutralized any military forces that approached their landing zones." Dr. Kim nodded, studying the limited footage of the aliens themselves. Most images were blurry or taken from a distance, but a few showed the creatures. They were roughly humanoid in shape, standing about 2 meters tall, but their bodies seemed to be covered in an exoskeleton-like armor. Their movements were precise but strangely stiff. "Look at this," she said, pointing to one video clip. "Do you see that tremor in their limbs?" Professor Park leaned closer. Motion sickness, or maybe they're struggling with Earth's gravity. Exactly, Dr. Kim said, excitement creeping into her voice despite the circumstances. Their movements suggest they evolved on a planet with different gravitational conditions, and look at how they shield their sensory organs from direct sunlight. I think our sun's radiation spectrum might be uncomfortable for them. As they analyzed the footage, all screens suddenly went dark, then flickered back to life with a new image. The face that appeared wasn't human. It had multiple eyes arranged in a pattern across what might be called a face, and parts that moved when it spoke in a language no one recognized. Then the image changed to text in multiple human languages. Your world contains resources vital to our survival. Resistance is inadvisable. They've hacked our global communication systems, Professor Park whispered. The message continued. We are the Vrexus. We require specific minerals and biological compounds found on your planet. We will extract these resources efficiently. Interference will result in elimination. Cooperation will be rewarded with technological knowledge. The transmission ended, leaving the world in stunned silence. In the days that followed, the Vrexus established what they called extraction zones around their landing sites. They deployed machines that began drilling deep into Earth's crust. Any military forces that approached were disabled, their electronics fried by some invisible energy pulse. Dr. Kim noticed something else in the new footage of the aliens working outside their ships. The tremors in their movements are getting worse, she observed. And look at these readings from our atmospheric monitoring stations. The data showed subtle changes in the composition of microbes in the air around the alien landing zones. Earth's microbiome is reacting to their presence, she explained to her colleagues. Our bacteria and viruses are attempting to colonize them, just as they would any new organic material introduced to the environment. 1 week after the arrival, the first signs of trouble for the Vrexus became apparent. Their movements grew more erratic. Some were seen stumbling or requiring assistance to return to their ships. They're getting sick, Dr. Kim realized. Their immune systems aren't equipped to handle Earth's microorganisms. Professor Park looked at her with dawning hope. Just like in that old book, War of the Worlds. They never considered that the smallest life forms on Earth would be their downfall. Dr. Kim shook her head. It's too early to celebrate. They might develop countermeasures, but it gives us something to work with, a potential weakness. That night, as Dr. Kim finally allowed herself a few hours of sleep on the cot in her office, she dreamed of microscopic battles taking place across the planet. Earth's ancient microbiome, evolving over billions of years, encountering alien biology for the first time. In the morning, she woke with a new determination. We need to collect samples from near the landing zones, she told Professor Park. If Earth's microbes are affecting them naturally, perhaps we can accelerate the process. Around the world, scientists were coming to similar conclusions. Humanity had found its first glimmer of hope against the Vrexus invaders. The fight for Earth had only just begun, but for the first time since the massive ships appeared in the autumn sky. Dr. Kim allowed herself to believe that the invaders might not be invincible after all. Major Sung Lee crouched behind the burnout tank, breathing heavily as alien drones buzzed overhead. For 3 weeks, the world had watched anxiously as the Vrexus established their mining operations. Then, without warning, they had launched a full attack. Status report, he whispered into his radio. Third squad completely gone, sir, came the shaky voice of Corporal Han. Those floating drones they cut right through our armor like it wasn't there. Major Lee peeked around the tank. The battlefield that had once been the outskirts of Busan was now a smoking ruin. Bodies of his soldiers lay scattered across the ground. Their K2 rifles, and even the heavy weapons, had proven useless against the alien technology. The drones were the worst, silent, floating spheres that emitted beams of energy that could slice through metal and flesh with equal ease. They moved in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. All remaining units, Major Lee spoke into his radio, fall back to the mountains. I repeat, Abandon the city defense line and head for the Jurisan Mountains." "Sir," questioned Corporal Han, "what about our orders to hold the city?" "Those orders were given by people who haven't seen what these things can do," Major Lee replied grimly. "Conventional warfare is suicide against this enemy. We need to regroup and rethink our approach." As the surviving soldiers began their retreat, Lee looked back at the city where he had grown up. Smoke rose from dozens of buildings. The aliens weren't targeting civilians specifically, but they showed no concern for collateral damage either. "We'll be back," he promised silently. 200 kilometers away, Dr. Nari Kim worked frantically in a hidden laboratory beneath an abandoned hospital. After the universities had been evacuated, she had salvaged what equipment she could and established this makeshift research facility. "Hand me the micropipette," she said to her assistant, Jin, a graduate student who had refused to abandon their work. On the table before them lay a partially destroyed alien drone. A South Korean fighter jet had managed to clip it with gunfire before being shot down, and resistance fighters had recovered the damaged device from a riverbed. "The outer shell is like nothing I've ever seen," Jin remarked, peering through a microscope. "It's not metal or plastic. It's almost like a grown material." Dr. Kim carefully extracted samples from different parts of the drone. When she examined them under her own microscope, she gasped. "Look at this," she called to her small team. "The inner components aren't fully mechanical. They have organic elements woven into the structure." The other scientists gathered around her microscope, taking turns to observe. "And these dark patches," she continued, pointing to cloudy areas on the sample, "those are colonies of Earth bacteria. They're already beginning to break down some of the organic materials." Professor Ta Park, who had joined her escape from Seoul University, nodded thoughtfully. "So their technology isn't immune to our microbiome either, just like their bodies." "Exactly," Dr. Kim said, her excitement growing despite their dire situation. "And there's something else." She moved to a computer where she had been analyzing the drone's communication signals. "These aliens use some form of quantum communication that we can't intercept. But look what happens when I play certain sound frequencies near the receiver." She activated a speaker that emitted a pulsing tone at a specific frequency. On the screen, the signal pattern from the damaged drone became erratic. "The signal disrupts completely at 172.4 Hz, she explained. "Something about that frequency interferes with their communication technology." "Could we use this?" asked Jin. "Build some kind of sonic weapon?" Dr. Kim nodded slowly. "Possibly, but we need more data. And we need to find a way to spread this information to other resistance groups." The internet had been one of the first casualties of the invasion. The Vrexis had systematically targeted communication satellites and server farms, isolating regions from each other. Only local networks remained functional in some areas. "The old radio frequencies," suggested Professor Park. "Military and emergency services used to maintain analog radio systems as backups. Some of those might still work." Dr. Kim agreed. That night, they rigged up a simple radio transmitter and began broadcasting their findings on multiple emergency frequencies, hoping someone would hear them. Major Lee led his surviving soldiers through the dense forest of the mountains. They had been joined by other military units and civilians fleeing the coastal cities. Their group now numbered nearly 300 people living in a hidden valley. Another drone patrol warned the lookout. Everyone under cover. They had learned that the dense foliage helped mask their heat signatures from the alien sensors. As they huddled in silence, waiting for the patrol to pass, Sergeant Min approached Major Lee with an old radio unit. "Sir, we're picking up a broadcast. Scientific data about the aliens." Lee followed him to their communications tent, where a crackling voice was explaining something about bacterial growth on alien technology. "This is Dr. Nari Kim broadcasting from Emergency Facility Echo 7. We have discovered vulnerabilities in Vrexis biology and technology. Their communication systems can be disrupted by sound waves at specific frequencies. Their technology contains organic components susceptible to Earth's bacteria. Lee leaned forward, hope rising in his chest for the first time in weeks. Can we respond to this transmission? Yes, sir, said Sergeant Min. But it might give away our position. It's worth the risk. Lee decided. These people might have found a way to fight back. He took the microphone. This is Major Sung Lee, 7th Special Forces Division. We have approximately 300 survivors in the Jurisan Mountain region. We've been gathering weapons and supplies. If you have a way to fight these things, we can help deploy it. The radio crackled with static before Dr. Kim's voice returned. Major Lee, we need to meet. We have theoretical solutions but need practical application. Can you send a small team to these coordinates? 3 days later, Major Lee sat across from Dr. Kim in her underground laboratory, listening intently as she explained her findings. The Vrexis didn't account for Earth's microbiome, Dr. Kim explained. Their biology and even their technology are vulnerable to our bacteria and viruses. They're already showing signs of degradation after just weeks of exposure. But they're still winning the war, Lee pointed out. Their weapons are too advanced. That's where the frequency disruption comes in, Dr. Kim continued. We've confirmed that specific sound patterns interfere with their neural network. The drones are all connected to a central control system. Disrupt that, and they become much less effective. Lee nodded slowly. So you're suggesting a two-pronged approach: biological warfare and sonic disruption. Exactly, Dr. Kim said. We've developed a concentrated bacterial solution that accelerates the breakdown of their organic tech components, and we've built prototype sonic disruptors that target their communication frequency. She demonstrated a small device that looked like a modified speaker. This emits the disruption frequency. The range is limited, about 50 meters. But if we could build enough of these. We can, Lee said firmly. We've been collecting electronic components, and we have engineers among our survivors. There's one more thing, Dr. Kim added. We need samples from different alien landing sites. The bacteria adapting to their biology might be different in various ecosystems. If we could collect and combine the most effective strains. Major Lee stood up, determination written across his face. We'll establish contact with other resistance groups, share what we know. Coordinate attacks. For the first time since the invasion began, a real plan was taking shape. The aliens had superior technology and weapons, but they had overlooked something crucial. Earth itself was fighting back. The Vrexis think they're invincible, Lee said, but they've never faced humanity before. Dr. Kim smiled grimly. And they've never faced Earth's microscopic defenders either. As they planned their first coordinated strike against an alien outpost, neither of them could know how quickly the tide would turn. The invaders had made a fatal mistake in underestimating both humanity's resilience and the power of evolution. Earth's smallest organisms were already adapting to exploit the new visitors, and with Dr. Kim's help, that process was about to accelerate dramatically. Rain pelted the observation post as Sun watched the alien patrol through his binoculars. The 3 Vrexis soldiers moved awkwardly through the muddy field below, their once fluid movements now jerky and uncoordinated. Every few steps, one would pause and shake violently before continuing. Do you see that? Sun whispered to June, his fellow scout. They can barely walk straight anymore. June nodded, adjusting his own binoculars. It's happening all over. My brother in the Western Cell says the aliens near Incheon are even worse. Some can't even leave their ships now. 6 months had passed since the Vrexis invasion began. At first, the aliens had seemed unstoppable, their technology far beyond anything humans could match. But something had changed. Over the past few weeks, the invaders had grown visibly weaker. Sun and Jun carefully made their way back through the forest to their hidden camp. What had begun as Major Lee's small band of survivors had grown into a well-organized resistance base housing over 1,000 people. Similar groups had formed worldwide, all sharing information through the old radio networks. When they reached the camp, Sun headed straight for the command center. a series of connected shipping containers buried partially underground and camouflaged with dirt and vegetation. Inside, Major Lee was studying a map with his lieutenants when Sun entered. "Sir, the Eastern Patrol is showing advanced symptoms. All 3 aliens were having trouble maintaining balance." Major Lee nodded. "Good. That matches reports from our other observation points. It's time to contact Dr. Kim." The Major moved to the radio station where an operator quickly established a connection with Dr. Kim's laboratory. "This is Lee. The symptoms are progressing exactly as you predicted. I think it's time." Dr. Kim's voice crackled through the speaker. "Our latest tests confirm it. Earth's microorganisms have adapted specifically to target Vrexus biology. The bacteria are attacking their equivalent of a nervous system." In her hidden laboratory, Dr. Kim stood surrounded by research equipment salvaged from universities and hospitals across the country. Her team had grown from the initial handful to nearly 50 scientists working around the clock. "Major, I've completed the final version of the sonic disruptor," she continued. "It's smaller and more powerful than the prototype, and we've isolated the most aggressive bacterial strains from samples collected worldwide. How soon can you get them to us?" Lee asked. "I'm coming myself," Dr. Kim replied. "These devices need proper calibration before deployment. We'll leave at nightfall." 2 nights later, Dr. Kim arrived at the Resistance base with a truck full of equipment. Major Lee greeted her personally, escorting her to the command center where she quickly set up her demonstration. "This is the Mark II sonic disruptor," she explained, showing them a device about the size of a small backpack. It emits precisely calibrated sound waves at 172.4 Hz, the frequency that disrupts Vrexus neural networks. She turned on the device. The humans felt nothing, but a nearby communications unit started displaying static. "It affects some of our electronics too," she admitted, "but nothing like what it does to them. Their entire command structure relies on a shared neural network. This disrupts that connection completely within a 100-meter radius." Major Lee examined the device with appreciation. "And you've brought how many?" 50, plus instructions to build more. We've simplified the design so they can be manufactured from common components." "And the bacterial weapon?" Lee asked. Dr. Kim held up a small pressurized canister. "We've created a concentrated aerosol containing the most effective bacterial strains collected from around the world. These microbes have already evolved to specifically target Vrexus biology. This just delivers them in a more efficient package." She pointed to a map on the wall. "The most strategically important target is their regional command center here, at the former Daejeon Science Complex. If we can disrupt their command structure, it will affect Vrexus operations across the entire Korean peninsula." Major Lee studied the map thoughtfully. "It's heavily guarded, but with these new weapons, we might have a chance." 1 week later, as midnight approached, 200 resistance fighters lay in position around the Daejeon Science Complex. The massive structure had been transformed by the Vrexus into their regional headquarters, with alien technology grafted onto the human architecture. Major Lee gave the signal, and the first team activated their sonic disruptors. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Vrexus guards began staggering around in confusion, unable to coordinate their movements or communicate with each other. Phase 1 successful, Lee whispered into his radio. "Advance to Phase 2. Resistance fighters moved forward, deploying more sonic disruptors at strategic points around the complex. The aliens' defensive response was chaotic. Some fired weapons randomly while others simply collapsed. Dr. Kim waited with the third team, monitoring the aliens' reactions. "It's working even better than expected," she told her assistant. "Their neural network is completely disrupted." When the outer perimeter was secured, Major Lee gave the order for the final phase. Teams equipped with Dr. Kim's bacterial weapons entered the complex, releasing the aerosol into the ventilation systems. By dawn, the resistance controlled the entire facility. Hundreds of Vrexus lay incapacitated, their bodies convulsing as Earth's microscopic defenders attacked their alien biology. "We need to move quickly," Dr. Kim urged as she examined the alien communication array. "We can use their own technology to broadcast the disruption frequency globally." Working with captured equipment, Dr. Kim's team reprogrammed the Vrexus communication system. All resistance groups worldwide should tune to frequency 7.83 mH, she instructed. They'll receive the sonic pattern and can replicate it through local broadcast systems. Major Lee watched as technicians connected their equipment to the alien technology. Will this really work worldwide? Their quantum communication network ignores distance, Dr. Kim explained. Once we access it, we can reach every Vrexus installation on Earth simultaneously. When everything was ready, Dr. Kim pressed the activation sequence. A low hum filled the room as the disruption frequency began broadcasting through the alien network. Across the planet, resistance groups received the transmission and immediately began repeating it through repurposed radio towers, television transmitters, and any broadcasting equipment they could find. In New York, Vrexus commanders suddenly lost contact with their troops. In the Amazon extraction zone, alien workers collapsed mid-operation. Across the Siberian mining facilities, Vrexus technology began failing as the frequency disrupted their neural network. The resistance movements worldwide launched coordinated attacks on weakened alien positions. For the first time since the invasion began, humans were winning. In orbit, the Vrexus High Command recognized the existential threat. Unable to maintain control of their ground forces, they resorted to their most devastating weapon, orbital bombardment. The first energy beam struck near Sydney, vaporizing an area 20 kilometers wide. The second hit outside Moscow. The third targeted the former Daejeon Science Complex. Dr. Kim was analyzing captured alien data when the warning came. "They're targeting us from orbit. Everyone evacuate immediately." The resistance fighters scrambled to escape the facility, grabbing what equipment they could. Major Lee organized the evacuation, making sure the sonic disruptor plans and bacterial samples were saved. "We can't let them destroy everything we've accomplished," Dr. Kim insisted as Lee pulled her toward the exit. "They won't," he promised. "We've already spread the technology too widely." They made it to a bunker 5 kilometers away, just as the energy beam struck. The entire complex vanished in a blinding flash, leaving only a smoldering crater. But it was too late for the Vrexus. Earth's microbiome had already infiltrated their ships through returning personnel. The bacterial adaptation was accelerating, evolving to target specific weaknesses in alien biology. Dr. Kim gathered her remaining team in the bunker. "They've made a fatal mistake," she told them, examining new samples under a microscope. "The heat from their orbital weapons has created perfect conditions for bacterial mutation. The strains are adapting even faster now." Reports from resistance groups worldwide confirmed her assessment. Despite the orbital strikes, the Vrexus ground forces continued to deteriorate. Their once perfect coordination had collapsed into chaos. "What happens next?" Major Lee asked, looking at the smoking crater that had once been Daejeon. Dr. Kim smiled grimly. "Now we take the fight to their ships." Major Lee stood on the hill overlooking what had once been the Vrexus main landing zone. 1 year had passed since the alien ships first appeared in Earth's skies. The landscape below him now told a different story than the one from those early days of helpless defense. Abandoned alien equipment littered the ground. Vrexus soldiers, once terrifying in their precision and power, now moved erratically as they loaded equipment onto transport vessels. Some stumbled and fell, unable to rise again. Others had to be carried by their comrades. "It's happening all over the world," said Captain Mina, his second in command, checking updates on her tablet. "Beijing reports complete withdrawal from their northern facility. Brazil says the Amazon extraction site is being evacuated. They're falling back everywhere." Lee nodded, a tight smile on his face. "Are our teams in position?" "Yes, sir. Resistance forces worldwide are ready to move on your command." He raised his radio. This is Eagle One to all points. Operation Homecoming is a go. I repeat, Operation Homecoming is a go. Across the hill, hundreds of fighters emerged from hiding places. They wore a mix of military gear and civilian clothes, but all carried weapons, some human-made, others salvaged from fallen aliens. The most important equipment, though, were the sonic disruptors strapped to their backs and the bacterial spray canisters on their belts. As the resistance fighters moved down toward the landing zone, Minna handed Lee a headset. "Dr. Kim is online for you." He put it on. "Doctor, we're beginning the assault. How's your end?" Dr. Kim's voice came through clearly. "The latest bacterial strain is even more effective than we hoped. Lab tests show it breaks down their neural tissue within hours, and we've upgraded the sonic disruptors to penetrate their ship hulls." "Good," Lee replied, "because today we take back our planet." The global counter-offensive began simultaneously across all continents, using the aliens' own quantum communication network, which Dr. Kim's team had hacked months earlier. Resistance forces coordinated their attacks with precision the Frexis themselves no longer possessed. In Korea, Major Lee led the assault on the primary landing zone. The resistance fighters moved quickly, deploying sonic disruptors at strategic points. The aliens' defensive response was confused and ineffective. Their weapons, once devastatingly accurate, now fired wildly as their operators struggled to maintain control of their own bodies. "They can't coordinate," Lee observed as his team advanced. "Their neural network is completely compromised." The few Vrexis who still fought effectively were quickly targeted with bacterial sprays. Within minutes, they too began showing symptoms: tremors, loss of balance, and eventually collapse. Lee's forces pushed toward the main Vrexis transport ship. Unlike the early days of the invasion, when approaching alien vessels meant certain death, now they advanced steadily against minimal resistance. "Their ship defenses are down," reported Captain Mina. "Dr. Kim's frequency is working." Lee pointed to a team of fighters carrying specialized equipment. "Get the boarding party ready. We need to secure their control center." Dr. Kim monitored the global operation from her new laboratory, established in what had once been a government bunker. Screens showed resistance forces advancing worldwide. New York, London, Moscow, Beijing, Cairo, Rio de Janeiro. Everywhere, the story was the same. The Vrexis were retreating in disarray, their forces disorganized and vulnerable. "They're loading something onto their main command ship," reported Jin, now her chief assistant, pointing to satellite imagery. "Energy readings are off the charts." Dr. Kim studied the data with growing concern. "Those patterns match weapons testing they conducted last month. I think they're preparing something big." She activated the communication link to Major Lee. "Major, we're detecting unusual activity on the main command ship in orbit. The energy signature suggests they're preparing a large-scale weapon." "What kind of weapon?" Lee's voice came back, punctuated by the sounds of battle. "Based on the readings, I believe it's a planetary sterilization device. It would generate a radiation pulse that destroys all organic life while leaving structures intact." There was a brief silence before Lee responded. "How do we stop it?" "You need to get to their orbital transport system. Every landing zone has one. It's the only way to reach the command ship in time." Lee gathered his elite team, 20 fighters who had trained specifically for ship infiltration. They fought their way to the center of the landing zone, where a cylindrical structure connected to the sky above. "This is their orbital elevator," Lee explained. "It uses some kind of gravity manipulation to transport materials between ground and orbit." The team secured the transport platform. Dr. Kim guided them remotely through the activation sequence they had learned from captured aliens. "Once you're aboard," she warned, "you'll have approximately 30 minutes before the weapon reaches critical charge. You need to disable the main control node." The platform hummed to life, creating a bubble of altered gravity around them. Lee felt his stomach lurch as they accelerated upward, the ground falling away at impossible speed. Within minutes, Earth became a blue curve below them, and ahead loomed the massive form of the Vrexus command ship. "Prepare for breach," Lee ordered as they approached, sonic disruptors at maximum. They docked with the orbiting vessel and forced their way in, immediately activating their sonic weapons. The effect was dramatic. Alien crew members writhed in pain, their neural networks overwhelmed by the disruption frequency. "This way," directed Captain Mina, following the schematics Dr. Kim had provided. "Control center should be 2 levels up." They fought through scattered resistance, their modified human weapons proving effective against the weakened aliens. Those Vrexus, still able to fight, moved slowly, their coordination shattered by the sonic assault and the bacteria now coursing through their systems. When they reached the ship's control center, they found the remaining Vrexus commanders gathered around a glowing spherical device. That's it, Lee realized. The sterilization weapon. The alien commanders turned to face the humans, their movements jerky but determined. Unlike the regular soldiers, these leaders wore protective suits that partially shielded them from the sonic disruption. "Disable the weapon," Lee ordered half his team while the rest engaged the alien commanders. The battle was fierce but brief. The humans, adapted to fighting in their own gravity and atmosphere, had the advantage over the struggling aliens. One by one, the Vrexus commanders fell. Mina worked frantically on the weapon controls, following Dr. Kim's instructions relayed through their communication link. "The interface is responding," she reported. "I'm shutting down the energy flow now." The glowing sphere dimmed, its pulsing rhythm slowing and then stopping altogether. "Weapon disabled," Mina confirmed. Lee approached the main control console. Displayed on its screens were images from around the world, resistance forces overwhelming Vrexus positions everywhere. The aliens' grand invasion was collapsing. "Dr. Kim," he called over the comm link, "we've secured the command ship and disabled the weapon. What now?" Her voice came back clear and confident. "Access their main communication array. We can broadcast a message to all Vrexus forces." Following her instructions, Lee activated the ship-wide system. His voice would now reach every Vrexus on and around Earth. "Attention all Vrexus forces. Your command structure has been compromised. Your weapon systems are disabled. Your biology is incompatible with Earth's environment. This planet has rejected you at the most fundamental level." He paused, looking at the blue world beneath them. "You have one option: immediate withdrawal. Any Vrexus remaining on Earth or in orbit after 24 hours will face complete biological breakdown. This is not a threat. It is simply the reality of what Earth's microbiome will do to your systems." After sending the message, Lee turned to his team. "Let's make sure they get the point." They moved through the ship, deploying bacterial canisters in the life support systems. The few remaining alien crew members were already showing advanced symptoms, their exoskeletons mottled with growth, their movements barely coordinated. "They're trying to adapt," Mina observed, watching an alien scientist desperately working at a medical station. "But they can't evolve fast enough to counter what Earth is doing to them." Lee nodded. Earth had billions of years to prepare its defenses. They never stood a chance. Within hours, the Vrexus command structure completely collapsed. Across the planet, alien ships began launching, abandoning equipment and outposts in their haste to escape. Humanity had won, not through superior technology or firepower, but through the invisible allies that had protected Earth since life first began. The microscopic guardians that made the planet uniquely, powerfully, and now provably their own. The sky over Seoul glowed with an unusual light as the last Vrexus ship rose through the atmosphere. Its engines left a purple trail that slowly faded in the dawn air. On a hilltop outside the damaged city, Dr. Nari Kim watched through binoculars as humanity's invaders retreated. "They're broadcasting something," said Jin, monitoring a captured alien communication device. "It's on all frequencies in their language and translated into ours." The message was simple: Earth, quarantine zone, biological hazard, approach forbidden. Major Lee smiled grimly. "They're warning others away." Around them, People cheered and embraced. After a year of occupation and struggle, the aliens were leaving. Not because of superior human weapons or technology, but because Earth itself had rejected them. The planet's microscopic defenders had proven more effective than any human-made weapon. "We need to move quickly," Dr. Kim said, ever practical despite the victory. "The technology they've left behind is invaluable, but it will degrade without maintenance." Major Lee nodded. "I'll organize recovery teams immediately." 6 months after the Phrexus retreat, the United Nations established the Global Recovery Initiative. For the first time in human history, nations worked together with minimal conflict, united by their shared experience of invasion and resistance. Dr. Kim was appointed head of alien technology research, leading a team of scientists from around the world. They set up headquarters in the former Phrexus Command Center outside Seoul, which had been abandoned intact when the aliens fled. "Their technology is at least 2 centuries ahead of ours," she explained during a briefing with world leaders. "But much of it is integrated with biological components that are now breaking down. We need to adapt it to work with Earth materials." Major Lee, now General Lee, headed the newly formed Earth Defense Force. "We can't assume the Phrexus were the only aliens out there," he warned the same assembly. "Next time, we need to be ready." The first priority was understanding the alien propulsion systems. Within a year, human scientists had reverse-engineered enough to begin building their own spacecraft using modified Phrexus technology. The second priority was defense. Using abandoned alien satellites and weapons platforms, Earth began constructing an orbital shield that could detect and intercept approaching vessels. 5 years after the invasion, the first human ship using alien technology reached Mars in just 3 days. Its crew included Dr. Kim, who insisted on seeing firsthand how Phrexus systems performed in space. "The bacterial adaptation continues to surprise us," she recorded in her journal as they orbited the red planet. "Some strains have evolved to actually repair and maintain certain alien components. It's as if Earth's microbiome is learning to use their technology." Back on Earth, cities were being rebuilt using materials salvaged from alien structures. The new buildings were stronger, more efficient, and better able to withstand natural disasters. Alien energy systems, once adapted for human use, provided clean power without pollution. General Lee established defense outposts on the Moon and Mars, equipped with early warning systems and weapons based on Phrexus designs. "We won't be caught unprepared again," he promised at the dedication ceremony for the lunar base. 10 years after the invasion, Earth had changed in ways few could have imagined. The shared experience of alien occupation had dramatically reduced international conflicts. The threat from beyond had put human disagreements into perspective. Dr. Kim, now in her 50s but still energetic, led the opening of the Global Science Academy in what had once been the Phrexus main landing zone. Students from every nation came to study alien technology and biology. "We must never forget the lesson of the invasion," she told the first class. "Our greatest strength was not our weapons or even our intelligence. It was our connection to Earth itself. We are part of this planet's biosphere, evolved over billions of years alongside countless other species. That deep integration was what saved us." General Lee, attending the ceremony, nodded in agreement. The Earth Defense Force had grown into an effective global protection system, with outposts throughout the solar system. Their ships regularly patrolled as far as Jupiter's moons. After the ceremony, Dr. Kim and General Lee walked through the memorial garden, where plants grew among preserved pieces of alien technology. "Have you seen the latest deep space intercepts?" Lee asked. Kim nodded. "Our linguists have translated enough of their communications now to understand the basics. They've classified Earth as extreme hazard, biological weapons planet, in their galactic database." Lee laughed. "If only they knew that our biological weapons were just the natural bacteria that live in our soil and water." "That's what makes it so effective," Kim replied. "We couldn't have designed a better defense system if we tried for 1,000 years." That same day, at the edge of the solar system, An automated monitoring station detected an anomaly. A ship of unknown design approached cautiously, its energy signature unlike the Vrex's vessels, but clearly artificial. The warning beacons that now orbited Pluto activated automatically, broadcasting in multiple formats. Warning: Earth QERANTING Zone. Biological Defense Systems active. Approach at risk of total biological contamination. The alien vessel paused. Its sensors scanned the beacons, analyzing the information. Then, without approaching further, it changed course and accelerated away from the solar system. In the monitoring station's database, the encounter was logged and transmitted back to Earth. It was the 7th such incident in the past 3 years. Dr. Kim reviewed the report in her office overlooking the rebuilt Seoul skyline. The city now featured a blend of human architecture and adapted alien designs, graceful towers with integrated gardens, transportation tubes connecting major buildings, and energy fields that protected against severe weather. Another one turned away. She told Jin, who had become her chief deputy over the years. "The warning system works," Jin replied. "No one wants to risk what happened to the Vrexes." Dr. Kim turned to the window, watching children play in a park that had once been a battlefield. The invasion was terrible, but look what came from it. We advanced centuries in just a decade. We're united as a species in a way we never were before. "And we're safer," added Jin. "No alien race will try to colonize Earth again." In orbit above them, satellites of human and alien design monitored the solar system. On the Moon, defense batteries stood ready. On Mars, research outposts studied the remnants of Vrex's technology. Throughout the asteroid belt, early warning systems watched for approaching ships. But Earth's greatest defense remained invisible: the countless microscopic organisms that had evolved alongside humanity for billions of years. The planet's true children, whose collective power had defeated an enemy from the stars. That evening, as Dr. Kim walked home through the bustling city, she passed a new monument that had been unveiled the previous week. It stood in the center of a plaza, a simple globe of the Earth, surrounded by microscopic shapes enlarged to human scale. Bacteria, viruses, fungi, all rendered in gleaming metal. The inscription read, "In honor of Earth's smallest defenders and the human spirit that harnessed their power. Together we prove that our world will never be conquered." Dr. Kim placed her hand on the cool metal. Sometimes she still had nightmares about the invasion. The terror of those early days when the aliens seemed unstoppable. But then she would wake and look out at the transformed world, stronger and more united than ever before. The Vrexes had come to conquer Earth and take its resources. Instead, they had given humanity a gift: the knowledge that they were not alone in the universe, and the technology to ensure they would never be victims again. At the edge of the solar system, the warning beacons continued their silent broadcast. Earth was protected, not by weapons or walls, but by life itself, the most powerful force in the universe.